After more than 2 years of fierce fighting between Russia and Ukraine, Ukraine seems to be on the verge of defeat. If NATO doesn't step in, the defeat might come earlier. Ukraine's defeat can only mean one thing. That is, the domino effect of chaos and conflict. NATO will lose face, and Putin will be bolder than ever. Under this new situation, the entire Europe will be at the mercy of Russia. So does it mean that a full-scale war between NATO and Russia is inevitable? French President Macron said as early as February 2020 for that when necessary. European countries might send troops to Ukraine to confront Russia. Subsequently, Russian President Putin boldly responded that everything is possible in the modern world and threatened to end the war with nuclear weapons if forced to. NATO held the largest military exercise since the Cold War to deal with a possible Russian threat, codenamed Steadfast Defender 2024. This exercise lasted from January 22, 2024 to May 31, 2024, involving about 90,000 soldiers from 30 to NATO member states. The exercise used more than 100 pieces of combat equipment, including 533 infantry fighting vehicles, 417 armored personnel carriers, and 166 tanks. So when will the all-out war between NATO and Russia break out? Since the Russia-Ukraine conflict in 2022, the United States has been the top donor of aid to Ukraine. However, the last aid package was delayed for about 6 months due to strong opposition from the Republican Party for Ukraine. These 6 months felt like 6 years. The city of Avdiivka fell under Russian control, and about 7,000 Ukrainians died as a result. This loss far exceeded the boundaries of the city. Russia is already reversing the situation of the conflict. The final aid package worth $61 billion was approved in April 2024. It seems that whether Ukraine survives or not depends entirely on a vote in the U.S. House of Representatives. The aid package includes air defense systems, medium and long-range missiles, and shells. These are all things that Ukraine urgently needed in the past few months. This should be enough to help Ukraine challenge Russia's air superiority and slow down its troops. Recently, Russia has occupied hundreds of square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. In just over 2 years, the United States has donated aid worth $72 billion to Ukraine. European countries have jointly donated nearly $100 billion. Germany tops the list with $11 billion in military aid, $3 billion in humanitarian aid, and then $1.5 billion in financial aid. Next is the United Kingdom, which has provided $5.7 billion in military aid, $600 million in humanitarian aid, and $3.5 billion in financial aid. France has provided nearly $3 billion in military aid, $400 million in humanitarian aid, and $870 million in financial aid to Ukraine. Even so, German Chancellor Scholz still criticized these contributions as too little and urged European allies to increase their support for Ukraine. Subsequently, France promised to provide about 40 of these key missiles to Ukraine to help it strengthen its defense against Russia. Germany also unilaterally promised to provide more than $7 billion in aid to Ukraine, while the NATO giants are still arguing about who contributes more and who contributes less. Russia has raised its military budget for 2020 to a record $140 billion. This figure means that Russia will use about 1/3 of its government expenditure for national defense. This sends a clear message that Russia is prepared for a long-term war. Putin seems to be ready for a long war, which has raised concerns about a wider conflict in Europe. Russia plans to recruit 300,000 or even more personnel in 2024. If Russia continues to increase its military budget, Ukraine might have no chance of winning. If Ukraine fails, A conflict between Russia and NATO is almost inevitable. Why? Because Putin will never be satisfied with just Ukraine. Ukrainian military experts believe that if Russia wins in Ukraine, the next step might be to turn its target to the Baltic states, such as Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia. These countries have a large number of Russian speakers. Putin can use the pretext of protecting Russian citizens to intervene. Moreover, the military forces of the Baltic states are limited. For example, Latvia's standing army is only about 6,500 people, while the size of the Russian army far exceeds this number. What is Putin's plan? Actually, it's simple: conquest. The former Soviet countries that are now NATO member states. In addition, the Suwa-Elki Gap has become a strategic location. This narrow passage between Poland and Lithuania is considered a weakness of NATO. If Russia controls this area, it will have a significant impact on NATO's defense capabilities in Eastern Europe. If Trump wins the U.S. presidential election in 2024, it might lead to civil unrest in the United States, providing an opportunity for Russia to create border conflicts in the region. Trump has criticized NATO for many years. His main criticism is that the United States pays the largest share of NATO's budget, while other member states can't even meet the contribution target of 2% of their GDP. He even said that he would encourage Russia to do whatever it wants to those countries that don't pay their dues. If he reduces the U.S. contribution to NATO or withdraws from NATO completely and turns a blind eye to the predicament of other member states, then Putin will be unstoppable.